The first hammer came through Clara Bennett's shoe shop window while she was fitting a little boy for winter boots. 6 men entered behind the flying glass, overturned her workbench, and poured black paint across every pair she had repaired. Her crime was simple so. The full-figured cobbler had refused an envelope of mafia money and rejected the demand to hide something inside a pair of custom shoes. They gave her until midnight to reconsider, or they would burn the building with her apartment above it. But when Clara examined one damaged shoe, she discovered a second sole stitched with the personal crest of Matteo DeLuca, the coldest mafia boss in Brooklyn. The men who destroyed her shop were wearing his colors, yet the stitching proved they were secretly preparing his assassination at exactly midnight. 3 black cars stopped outside. Matteo stepped through the wreckage, dismissed every armed guard, and slowly knelt before Clara's door. "You were right to refuse my money," he said. "Now I need you to decide whether I live until morning." The little boy did not cry when the hammer came through the glass. He stared at the silver head buried in Clara Bennett's display case and held one stockinged foot above the floor, as if the rule about not stepping on broken glass mattered more than fear. Clara moved before the second blow. She lifted Noah Rise from the fitting stool and carried him behind the oak workbench. At 29, she had the soft, full-figure strangers mistook for slowness, but years of hauling hides had given her sure balance. Chestnut hair shook loose around her young, round face as the window collapsed. 6 men entered. Their black coats showed small silver DeLuca pins at the lapels. The tallest held the hammer. Another carried the cream envelope. Clara had pushed back across her counter 40 minutes earlier. "Last chance," he said. Clara kept one arm around. No, my answer didn't change. The envelope had contained $12,000 and a thin brass disc no wider than a quarter. The man had wanted the disc sealed inside the heel of a pair of custom Oxfords waiting in her locked cabinet. He had called it a harmless tracking tag. Clara had asked why a harmless device needed to be hidden from the owner. That was when his politeness ended. Now he swept 3 repaired shoes from a shelf. "Midnight. Put the wafer where we showed you, or this place burns with the apartment above it." Noah's mother, Elena, appeared at the rear stair with her phone in her hand. The hammerman saw her and struck the security camera from the ceiling. He did not chase her. He wanted witnesses. He wanted the neighborhood to remember whose pin he wore. The men destroyed only what made the shop a shop. They overturned the finishing machine, poured black dye across customer boxes, and split her Father Maple last rack. They left the cash drawer closed. Before departing, the tall man set the brass disc on the counter. "Midnight," he repeated. "Mr. DeLuca dislikes being refused." Rain tapped the broken frame. Elena took Noah upstairs and called the police. Clara knew the attackers had made one mistake. Men who did not understand shoes assumed destruction erased information. Customer pairs went left. Loose leather went right. She matched torn order tags by fiber, nail pattern, and the crescent impressions left by her own lasting pliers. Near the ruined cabinet she found one black Oxford that was not hers. Its upper was calfskin of exceptional quality, but the outsole had been attached by someone trying to imitate hand welting. Beneath the visible sole lay a second layer of leather. Clara peeled back an edge with her skiving knife. Black thread formed a tiny crowned lion between the layers. She had seen that crest once before, 8 years earlier. Matteo DeLuca's elderly valet had brought in a damaged travel shoe and made Clara promise never to reproduce the crowned lion beneath the heel. It marked footwear prepared for the Don himself. The imitation was almost perfect. The lion faced left instead of right. Clara examined the heel cavity. It had been hollowed to accept the brass disc. A copper filament ran beneath the shank and ended in a pressure contact under the ball of the foot. The disc was not simply a tracker. When compressed by a wearer's full weight, it would transmit. Someone had made a counterfeit personal shoe for Matteo DeLuca and tried to force her to complete its hidden mechanism. If found afterward, the work could be blamed on the cobbler who had publicly refused mafia money and supposedly changed her mind. After police left, the building's gas died, and Elena found a fuel-soaked rag beneath the rear door. Clara sent Noah and Elena through the adjoining tailor shop. Then she placed the counterfeit shoe, the brass disc, and the reversed crest on her cleanest square of white leather. She photographed them with Alina's borrowed phone and sent the image to the only DeLuca contact she possessed. The old number written on the back of the valet's card. The message showed delivered. At midnight, 3 black cars stopped outside. Men in dark suits emerged first. Their hands stayed beneath their coats. Then Matteo DeLuca stepped onto the rain-dark sidewalk. He was 34, tall and powerfully built beneath a black overcoat, with swept-back black hair, a trimmed beard, and black and gray tattoos climbing his throat above an open collar. His expression did not change when he saw the wreckage or the fuel rag on the pavement. Clara stood behind the broken doorway, with the shoe in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other. "All of you stay outside," Matteo said. His guards hesitated. He repeated nothing. They obeyed. He crossed the glass alone, stopped 3 feet from Clara, and looked at the counterfeit crest. Something cold moved behind his eyes. Then the most feared man in Brooklyn lowered himself to one knee in the wreckage. "You were right to refuse my money," he said. "Now I need you to decide whether I live until morning." Clara set down the extinguisher, but not the shoe. "Start by telling me why men wearing your crest threatened a child in my shop." Matteo looked up at her without flinching. "Because someone wants your neighborhood to hate me before he kills me. If I survive dawn, I can prove which man if I don't. The one who sent them inherits everything outside." One of the parked cars exploded into flame. Matteo rose as the pressure wave shuddered through the broken window. He did not reach for Clara. He turned his body between her and the street. One tattooed hand braced against the counter while his guards dragged their wounded driver behind an engine block. The empty lead car had been a warning. Matteo's convoy could be reached, and choosing his side carried a price. "Rear stairs," Matteo said. "Fuel rag at the rear door." His eyes flicked to hers. He accepted the correction immediately. "Adjoining building?" "Tailor shop. Shared cellar wall. But the passage is narrow. Use it." Clara refused to abandon the evidence. She wrapped the counterfeit shoe and brass disc in the white leather and pushed the bundle beneath her fitted burgundy work jacket. Matteo sent 2 guards to clear the cellar, while another smothered the flames before they reached the awning. He moved with controlled economy, but Clara noticed the anger in his jaw when he saw Noah's small boot lying among the glass. They crossed through Mr. Alvarez's dark tailor shop and emerged into an alley 2 buildings east. Rain ran from the fire escapes. Matteo's remaining car waited beyond the corner, its rear door open. Clara stopped. "Where are you taking me? Somewhere. The men with my pins cannot enter. They already entered my shop. That is why I am no longer asking you to trust the pins." He offered his bare hand, palm up. Tattoos covered the back and selected fingers, but the gesture contained no force. Clara looked at the alley mouth. A black sedan without headlights rolled slowly past. The passenger lifted a phone toward them. She took Matteo's hand and entered the car. During the drive, he explained that 3 allied families would meet at a waterfront warehouse at 7. Matteo had to ratify a compact barring Vescari weapons from DeLuca docks. If he died there, his cousin Luca Vescari could invoke an emergency succession clause. The counterfeit shoes had arrived from Matteo's trusted valet service. "Who controls the valet service?" Clara asked. "My household office. That means several people. It means Luca." Matteo said the name too quickly. Clara heard certainty built from history rather than proof. Their refuge was St. Agnes Boxing Club, owned by retired trainer Dominic Rizzo. He admitted them without questions. Bare bulbs lit a canvas-covered ring while rain hammered the skylights. Clara spread the shoe parts across a folding table. Matteo removed his wet overcoat. His midnight blue suit and open-collar black shirt revealed the tattoos across his neck and upper chest. He stood with his arms folded, stern and still, while she worked. "Your real shoes," she said. "Where are they?" "At my house, then. No one goes near them until I do." Dominic made a sound that might have been a laugh. Matteo only nodded. Clara opened the brass disc with a fine awl from Dominic's repair cabinet. Inside were a battery, a pressure switch, and a transmitter no more complicated than a wireless doorbell. Its simplicity frightened her. It did not need to guide a missile or unlock a computer. It needed only to send one signal at the instant Matteo put his weight on the shoe. A receiver could be attached to an alarm or an explosive. she said. Matteo called warehouse chief Anton Greco. A junior guard said Anton had dismissed the night crew under Matteo's written authority. "Did you sign that order?" Clara asked. "No, then cancel the meeting. If I cancel without appearing, the compact dies, Vescari guns move through my docks, and our allies become enemies. Your pride is not worth a warehouse full of bodies." His gaze hardened. "This is not pride. Then explain the difference to the people who would die with you." Dominic quietly left them alone. Matteo stared at the disc. "My father ended a harbor war by promising a DeLuca would stand at every ratification. If I hide now, Luca gets the war he wants whether I live or not." Clara understood promises made to working families, but she also knew when tradition became a weapon. "Then we change the shoes and the place you stand," she said. Matteo's phone vibrated. A photograph filled the screen. Elena and Noah inside Mr. Alvarez's tailor shop, taken less than a minute earlier. Beneath it was a message. "Bring the cobbler and the finished shoes to Pier 9/2. Come without police, or the boy enters the river first." For the first time, Matteo's restraint cracked not in his face, but in the way his hand closed around the phone until his knuckles whitened. Clara took the device from him before he could break it. They were supposed to be gone. They came back for something. She pictured Noah's unfinished winter boots beneath the fitting stool. His mother would have returned for them because the boy had no other pair that fit. Clara's own promise had led them back into danger. At 12:38, Clara stood in the center of the boxing ring and rebuilt the enemy's shoe. She hated every pull of the thread. The work required calm, and calm felt like betrayal while Noah was captive. Matteo placed guards at the doors and called no police, honoring the kidnapper's condition for the moment. He also refused Clara's first plan: deliver the real transmitter and trust his men to take the pier. They chose Pier 9 because Luca leases the cold storage sheds around it, he said. He controls the roofs, the cameras, and the only vehicle gate. If we rush it, they kill the boy before we cross the fence. Then give them what they asked for. They asked for you because they need my hands to make the shoe pass inspection. Matteo stepped closer to the ropes. "And once you do, I become unnecessary." The answer tightened his jaw. Clara bent over the last, refusing to look away from the truth. She had one advantage. The counterfeit maker had copied the DeLuca crest, but not the concealed language of a hand-welted shoe. A cobbler could alter the pitch of the heel by less than 2 millimeters, enough to change when the pressure contact closed. She built a hollow channel through the cork filling and moved the filament toward the outside edge. The disc would remain silent under an ordinary step. To trigger it, the wearer would have to roll his ankle outward and press his heel twice. Matteo watched her test the mechanism with a wooden foot. "Can anyone see the change?" "Not unless they know exactly how you walk." "Luca does." That was the first honest uncertainty Matteo had shown. He and Luca had grown up in the same guarded house after Matteo's mother married Luca's uncle. They had learned to box together. Luca knew an old injury made Matteo favor his right knee after long drives. He knew which side Matteo's holster pulled his jacket and which hand he used to open doors. "Then you need to walk differently," Clara said. For 20 minutes, she made the feared Don cross the boxing ring in a borrowed shoe while she corrected his stride. He obeyed without complaint. When he rolled his weight too far inward, she touched his hip to square him. Heat moved up her arm, his eyes lowered to her face, controlled but suddenly attentive. Again, she said, "You enjoy giving orders. I enjoy keeping stubborn customers alive." Something almost softened in his eyes, not a smile. A recognition. At 1:15, Dominic returned with a paper floor plan of Pier 9 drawn from memory. Clara recognized the delivery lane behind the cold storage sheds. For years, fishermen had brought deck boots to her shop, complaining about the yellow grease used on that pier's loading rails. It stained rubber permanently and became dangerously slick in rain. "The kidnappers will use the covered loading bay," she said. "They want to stand on the open pier in this weather. The West Bay has a service trench beneath the rail platform." Dominic tapped the plan. "Big enough for a man, for a child and one adult crawling, not for Matteo." Matteo studied her. "You are not entering a trench beneath armed men. Then find another person who knows where the access hatch sticks in winter." He could have commanded her, Instead, he walked to the far corner, called Elena's brother, and confirmed that mother and child had indeed returned to the shop. At 12:17, he then called 2 dock workers Clara named, men whose boots she had repaired for years. Neither served the DeLuca family. Both hated Luca's foreman for cutting union shifts. They agreed to open the outer maintenance gate and kill the loading bay lights at 1:55. The plan was narrow because time was narrow. Matteo would arrive visibly at the vehicle gate with the finished shoe and 3 guards. Clara and Dominic would enter through the service trench. The moment Noah was clear, the dock workers would darken the bay. Matteo's men would move only then. Before they left, Matteo fastened his overcoat and handed Clara a small radio. "If anything changes, you leave. If anything changes, we adapt. That is not what I said. I don't work for you." He held her gaze. "No, you don't at Pier 9. The rain had turned to sleet." Clara crawled through the service trench with cold water soaking her skirt and the radio pressed beneath her chin. Dominic followed. Through gaps in the platform, she counted 5 men. Elena sat bound to a chair near the loading office. Noah was nowhere in sight. Matteo's car appeared at the gate at exactly 2. Headlights swept across the bay. The tall hammerman marched Elena into the open and shouted for Clara. Then a small hand touched Clara's ankle in the darkness. Noah had been hidden inside the trench all along, a strip of silver tape across his mouth. The kidnappers had discovered the access route before them. Behind Dominic, the hatch slammed shut and locked. Clara peeled the tape from Noah's mouth before his frightened breath became a cry. He clung to her, shivering in a sweater damp from the trench. Above them, boots crossed the metal platform. The kidnappers had placed him below as bait for anyone using the only concealed approach. Dominic tested the hatch. It did not move. Pinned from outside, the trench sloped toward the river. Water had risen around Clara's ankles and continued to climb with the tide. They had perhaps 20 minutes before Noah could no longer stand safely. Matteo's voice came through the radio, quiet beneath the engine noise. "Clara." She covered the speaker with her palm. The men above were listening for sound. Her eyes adjusted to the narrow space. Along the wall ran the old loading rail, held by square bolts glazed in yellow grease. One bolt was missing. Another had loosened until its head stood proud of the bracket. Clara pressed the transmit key once, paused. Then twice the signal she and Matteo had agreed meant the child was found, but danger remained. Matteo did not answer. He trusted her silence. Outside, the hammerman demanded the custom shoe. Matteo held the white leather bundle where everyone could see it. "Release the woman," he said. "The cobbler first. You were told I would bring the work, not the worker." The exchange stalled exactly as Matteo intended. In the trench, Clara removed the steel shank from Noah's unfinished boot. She had tucked it into her jacket after finding the boot in the wreckage, intending to size the mate later. Now she wedged the shank beneath the raised bolt and leaned her full weight against it. The first attempt bent the steel and tore skin from her palm. She tried again, changing the angle the way she would lift a clenched heel nail without damaging leather. The bolt turned a quarter rotation. Water reached Noah's knees. Dominic braced the shank with both hands. Together, they worked the bolt free. The rail sagged from the wall, revealing a drainage opening no wider than a serving tray. Clara pushed Noah through first. Dominic followed, dislocating neither shoulder only because Clara turned him diagonally. Her own broad hips caught at the frame. Panic flashed hot and humiliating. The water climbed to her thighs. She backed out, stripped off the soaked burgundy jacket, and exhaled until her ribs narrowed. Dominic pulled from the far side while she turned one shoulder forward. Metal scraped her waist. Then she was through. Breathless and bleeding lightly along one forearm, they emerged behind stacked fish crates outside the west wall. Clara gave the radio signal. The loading bay lights died. Matteo moved in darkness. He drove his shoulder into the hammerman, pulled Elena clear, and kicked the brass disc beneath a parked forklift. His guards entered from the gate, while Dominic carried Noah toward the maintenance road. The fight lasted less than a minute. Gunshots struck steel and shattered a lamp, but Matteo's men had angles. The kidnappers had hostages they no longer controlled. Clara saw one attacker break away toward the forklift. He was not trying to escape. He was reaching for the disc. She shouted a warning. Matteo turned. The man stamped his boot twice on a remote pedal hidden near the tire. The brass wafer beneath the forklift chirped. Across the water, an abandoned storage shed erupted. The receiver had been placed there as a demonstration. At dawn, its twin could ignite a charge beneath the council floor. Matteo's guards captured the hammerman and 2 others. The rest fled by boat during the confusion. Elena and Noah were alive. Clara's plan had worked, but not cleanly. Dominic's left shoulder had been cut by a ricochet, and Matteo bled from a split at his temple. At 2:35, they sheltered beyond Luca's cameras. Clara cleaned Matteo's wound while he sat on a tool chest. He watched her scraped hand instead of the gauze at his temple. "You nearly drowned because I brought this war to your door," he said. "Your cousin brought it under my name. Then stop treating your name like a shield. Right now it is his weapon." Matteo lowered his eyes. No one in the room spoke to him that way. Clara expected anger. Instead, he took the bandage from her and wrapped her palm with surprising care. "My mother used to say authority reveals the lie a man most wants to believe," he said. "Mine was that fear made my house loyal. Fear makes people quiet. That seed the same thing." His hand remained around hers a second longer than treatment required. Neither mistook attraction for trust. One of the captured men began laughing from the adjoining room. "You still don't understand," he called. "The shoe was never meant for the warehouse." Matteo crossed the room and opened the door. The prisoner's mouth was bloodied, but his satisfaction was intact. "At 6:30, he said, "the council comes to your house instead. Your own protocol moves the meeting after a sight breach. The real shoes are already waiting there." Matteo's security protocol had been written after an ambush killed his father. If a council site was compromised within 12 hours of a meeting, the gathering automatically moved to the DeLuca residence. Only 4 people knew the fallback room: Matteo, Luca, household chief Anton Greco, and Matteo's aunt Sofia Vescari. The enemy had planned around Matteo's caution at 2:47. Matteo called the house and ordered an evacuation. The line connected, but no one spoke. Then the residence alarm reported every exterior door sealed from the central panel. Someone had converted the safe house into a cage. "How many people inside?" Clara asked. 9 staff, my Aunt Anton if he returned, and your real shoes." Matteo looked toward the rain-black windows. Those are no longer the only threat. The captured hammerman, Rafe Calder, refused further answers. Matteo could not storm his residence. Steel shutters and interior locks could isolate the fallback room, and forcing entry might trigger any charge. Clara examined the valet's photographs. The black Oxfords looked flawless. Both crowned lions faced right. "Can the device be inside without changing the outside?" Matteo asked. "Yes, but the shoe would feel different. I never tried them on. Who did?" He went still. Custom shoes were checked on a wooden duplicate of the owner's foot called a last. Matteo's personal last remained at Clara's shop, after the old valet left it there 8 years ago. Someone had used her shop as the unknowing storage place for the most precise key to Matteo's footwear. The attackers had smashed her last rack while searching for it and erasing tool marks. "I moved it last spring," Clara said. "The heel was splitting, so I put it in the apartment closet until I could repair it." Matteo's gaze sharpened. The apartment they threatened to burn. If the original survived, its grain and old repair marks could distinguish genuine DeLuca work from the counterfeit last used to manufacture the trap. It would not identify Luca by itself, but it could show the council that Matteo's household system had been penetrated before the shoes ever reached Clara. They returned to the block at 3:20 under cover of a city utility van borrowed from one of Dominic's friends. Firefighters had extinguished the car and cordoned half the street. Clara entered through Mr. Alvarez's cellar, with Matteo beside her. He had changed into a dry black shirt and work jacket from the boxing club. His tattoos remained visible at his throat and hands. Clara wore borrowed trousers, a cream sweater, and a bandage around her palm. Every movement reminded her of the scrape along her waist, but she could walk. Her apartment had been searched. Drawers gaped. Cushions lay cut open. In the closet, a loose floorboard stood raised. The wooden last was gone. Clara was furious at herself. Her photograph had told watchers she found the crest and would search for Matteo's old repair. I should have moved it years ago, she said. You had no reason to know its value. I had reason tonight. I thought only about the shoe in my hand. Matteo did not erase her mistake with reassurance. Then we account for it and move. That answer steadied her more than comfort would have. Below, one maple last remained wedged beneath the split rack. Its heel bore a triangular stain from transfer ink used to copy Matteo's last. The same ink had marked whoever removed it. Specialty ink? Matteo asked. Common in bespoke work, uncommon everywhere else. Mr. Alvarez's street camera had been smashed, but the 24-hour laundromat across the road kept an old analog recorder. Its owner, Mrs. Park, trusted Clara and let them view the tape at 1:19, while Clara was already en route to Pier 9. A man entered the cellar, wearing a city raincoat. When he emerged 7 minutes later, the cuff showed a triangular black stain. His face remained hidden. He climbed into Anton Greco's distinctive vintage sedan. Matteo stared at the grainy screen. Anton had served his father for 22 years. He controlled the residence alarms and had supposedly vanished before midnight. Matteo's old certainty about Luca shifted toward a more painful possibility. Luca might be the architect, but Anton had given him the house. At 3:58, Matteo's phone rang from Sofia Vascari's number. His aunt whispered, "Matteo, Anton says the house is under attack. Luca is here trying to protect us. He says you've been compromised by a woman from the neighborhood." Before Matteo could answer, Anton took the phone. "Bring Clara Bennett to the residence by 5, he said, "or your aunt dies believing you chose a stranger over your blood." Matteo ended the call at 4 o'clock beneath the crowned sign. Clara's father had carved. "Anton expects me to refuse," he said. "He wants Sofia frightened enough to support Luca's succession claim when the council arrives. Then don't give him the choice he expects. I will not trade you for my aunt, you want tea. I am going because the device is inside that house, and I am the only person here who can take it apart without announcing what I am doing." Matteo's expression became colder, the way a door became harder when someone leaned against it. No, Clara stepped close enough to see the faint cut at his temple beneath the bandage. "You knelt in my shop and asked me to decide whether you lived until morning. Did you mean that only while my answer suited you?" His eyes held hers. He could command armed crews across Brooklyn. But he had no language for a woman who insisted on owning her risk. "If you enter," he said at last, "you follow my signal when it is time to leave if I can. That is not enough. It is the honest promise." Matteo accepted it with visible difficulty. Clara chose 2 undamaged shoes, one near Matteo's size and one smaller. She rebuilt the larger heel so a brittle shank would snap under a full step. Severing the transmitter's copper filament, it would survive visual inspection and fail only beneath a wearer's weight. "A dead device," Dominic said, his injured shoulder strapped beneath a borrowed coat. "A device that dies at the moment they believe it wakes." The smaller shoe became insurance. A battery and second filament inside it could create a nearby pulse if Anton tested the larger heel. It was a Cobbler stage trick whose success depended on timing. Matteo watched her close the welts with bandaged hands. "You should hate me. I hate what your name allowed men to do. There is no clean separation, then make one." His voice lowered. "If we survive, your block will no longer pay protection to any DeLuca crew." Clara pulled the thread tight. "Don't buy my courage after refusing to buy my silence." The rebuke landed. Matteo inclined his head. "Then I will end it because it is wrong." That was the second promise she chose to remember. At 4:35, Matteo sent separate couriers warning the council families to enter neither site until he appeared. Dominic took Elena, Noah, and Rafe to St. Agnes under Union protection. At 4:50, Clara and Matteo approached the DeLuca residence in Anton's recovered vintage sedan. Using the traitorous car let them pass the first gate before the guards understood who sat inside. Matteo had only 2 loyal men hidden in the trunk compartment. Everyone else stayed away to prevent a firefight around the trapped staff. The mansion rose behind iron fencing. Its lower windows shuttered. Anton waited beneath the portico with a pistol. Luca Vascari stood beside silver-haired Sofia, whose bruised face showed fury rather than fear. "You brought the cobbler," Luca called. "I underestimated your sentiment. You underestimated hers," Matteo said. Clara carried the white leather bundle against her chest. Matteo walked half a step ahead, his hands visible. At the door, Anton searched him and removed a knife from his ankle, a phone from his coat, and a slim pistol at his back. He searched Clara less carefully, avoiding the intimate shape of her fitted sweater and broad hips with embarrassed impatience. He found her all roll, but missed the smaller shoe, sole strapped flat beneath the waistband at her back. Inside, the staff knelt along the entrance hall under guard. Luca had dressed his men in DeLuca colors. The sight made Matteo's face turn utterly still. "The shoes," Luca said. Clara handed over the bundle. Luca opened it, examined the crowned lion, and passed the Oxford to Anton. Anton produced a small receiver. When he squeezed the heel, nothing happened. His eyes narrowed. Clara shifted her weight onto the hidden smaller sole. The receiver flashed green. Anton relaxed. Luca smiled faintly. "Beautiful work." Then Clara saw the dark triangular stain on Anton's right cuff, half concealed beneath his jacket. The transfer ink on the last rack had marked him. Matteo followed her gaze and saw it too. They finally possessed a living link between the stolen last, the breached house, and the man controlling the alarms, but Anton was only the door. Luca was still the hand directing him. "Put them in the boot room," Luca ordered. "At 6, the council will watch Matteo dress for his own execution." The windowless boot room predated electronic security. Clara smelled cedar, polish, damp mortar, and fresh-cut leather. Matteo's genuine black Oxfords sat on a central table beside the stolen wooden last. The old maple form bore the shallow nick Clara's father had cut 8 years earlier while repairing its heel. Next to it lay a knife, black transfer ink, and a page of Anton's security stationery covered with trial impressions of Matteo's signature. Luca had not expected them to leave the room alive. He no longer needed to hide his tools. Anton locked them in with one guard stationed outside. Clara crossed to the table, but Matteo caught her wrist before she touched anything. "Look first," he said. He had learned from her. A copper wire emerged from the right heel and disappeared through the tabletop. Removing the disc would alert Luca. Clara followed the wire with her eyes. It entered the wall beside an old radiator pipe. "Where does that go?" "The fallback room is below us," Matteo said. "1 floor down. The bomb might already be under the council table." The shoe on this bench was a live part of its alarm system. Cutting the wrong filament could tell Luca they had tampered with it. Anton had practiced an order transferring command to Luca if Matteo became medically incapable. Once Matteo died, Luca could claim control long enough to open the docks to Vescari weapons. "Why does Anton need you alive until 6? Clara asked. "A biometric seal," Matteo said. "My signet and my thumbprint are required together for emergency succession. Then they'll force you to authenticate the forgery before the meeting." "Yes, behind the riding boots." An abandoned dumbwaiter shaft ran to the servants' floor. It was too narrow for Matteo and barely wide enough for Clara. "No," Matteo said as soon as he understood. "You keep using that word after it stops being useful. The fall is 1 floor onto stone, then I1T fall." Clara lifted a coil of harness cord from the cabinet. Matteo anchored the cord around the radiator and tested it. Clara tied it beneath her arms and gave him the hidden smaller sole. "If Anton tests the receiver again, press here," she whispered. "Once only, a longer pulse will expose us." His tattooed fingers closed around the leather. "If you are not back in 10 minutes. I break the door. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, the door is the least important thing in this house." Matteo touched the uninjured side of her face, a restrained gesture made unbearable by the danger around it. "Clara," she waited. "I have spent my life confusing possession with protection. I will not do that to you." The words were neither confession nor demand. They were an admission of the trust he was trying to learn. Clara covered his hand with hers, then held the rope. She descended. The shaft scraped her injured waist and reopened the cut on her forearm. At the bottom, she eased open a warped service panel into the pantry. The security shutters blocked all exterior light. A red emergency lamp cast long shadows across the kitchen. Clara freed 2 staff members from the pantry. Sophia had spilled tea on the security console. Disabling cameras in the servants' corridor, Matteo's aunt had bought them an unseen route. 1 floor below the boot room, Clara found the fallback chamber. The door stood open. Beneath the long council table, 4 bricks of explosive surrounded a receiver wired to the house alarm. Removing the receiver would trigger the shutters and likely the charge. The pressure signal from Matteo's shoe would arm it. Anton's central command would detonate it after the council entered. Clara could not disarm explosives, but she understood the shoe. If Matteo's heel never armed the receiver, Anton's command could not complete the circuit. Footsteps entered the corridor. Clara slipped behind a tapestry as Luca and Anton came into the chamber. The council couriers received Matteo's warning. Anton said, "Russo refuses to enter the property, then bring Matteo outside." Luca replied, "Authenticate the transfer in front of the gate. Once the families see his seal, they will approach. The woman dies first if he resists." Anton hesitated. "You promised no staff casualties. I promised you command of the North Docks and your son's gambling debt erased. Do not confuse the price with mercy." Clara pressed Elena's borrowed phone still in her pocket since the shop against the tapestry and started an audio recording. Anton looked toward the faint electronic chime. Clara silenced the phone, but Anton had already heard it. He crossed the chamber and tore the tapestry from the wall. Clara threw the heavy brass curtain rod across the doorway and ran. Anton was faster, but his polished soles had no grip on stone dampened by Sophia's tea. Clara's rubber work shoes held. He slipped at the turn and lost his pistol beneath a cabinet. Luca shouted for guards. Clara reached the dumbwaiter shaft and pulled twice on the harness cord. Matteo hauled upward, her broad hips caught at the frame again, pain flaring along the existing scrape. But she changed her angle before panic could steal her breath. Matteo dragged her into the boot room as the first guard opened the lower service panel. "They know," she gasped. "Bomb under the council table. Your shoe arms it. Anton's console fires it. Luca needs your seal outside because the council want to enter." The recording captured Luca's promise of the North Docks and Anton's son's gambling debt. With the forged transfer, stolen last, and ink on Anton's cuff, it established motive and participation. Matteo hid the phone inside the torn lining of his work jacket. Then he pressed the smaller sole once as Anton tested the receiver outside. Green light showed beneath the door. "Put on the real shoes," Clara said. Matteo looked at the wired pair. "You said touching them alerts Luca, not if the circuit still feels the same resistance." Anton had taken her tools, but the wooden last held old finishing nails. Clara loosened one and lifted the welt. She inserted the brittle shank and looped the copper filament around it. Matteo's first full step would break the circuit before the disc completed its pulse. The alteration took 6 minutes. Clara closed the welt with cord from her sweater seam and darkened it with ink. It needed to survive one step. At 5:43, Luca's men opened the boot room. Matteo wore the Oxfords and the black work jacket over his open collar shirt. Clara walked beside him. One hand pressed against her bleeding forearm. Luca waited in the entrance hall with Sophia and the staff arranged behind him. Anton stood at the security console, his cuff scrubbed but still shadowed with ink. "Walk," Luca ordered. Matteo placed his right foot down. Inside the heel, the shank snapped. Only Clara heard the tiny crack. The copper filament separated on Anton's console. The arming light remained dark. Anton looked at Clara. She shifted onto the smaller sole hidden inside her work shoe and pressed once. His handheld receiver flashed. He assumed the house console had a delay. The front shutters rose. Cold dawn light entered the hall. Beyond the gates, cars belonging to the Russo, Mancini, and Belandi families lined the wet road, but their leaders remained outside as Matteo's warning instructed. Luca guided Matteo onto the portico at gunpoint, keeping the weapon hidden beneath his coat. Clara and Sophia followed. Anton carried the forged transfer on a blank leather folder. Its writing turned away from the distant witnesses. "Tell them you appoint me emergency regent," Luca murmured. "Seal the order and the woman lives." Matteo looked at Clara. The moment contained the old temptation of his power. Decide for everyone, sacrifice one person, preserve the territory, and call control protection. Clara shook her head once, not because she wanted to die, because she refused to let Luca turn her life into Matteo's chain. Matteo faced the gate. There will be no emergency regent. Luca drove the hidden pistol harder against his ribs. The DeLuca claim to the North Weapons route ends today. Matteo continued. Russo may close it under neutral authority. I surrender the revenue and the succession leverage attached to it. the announcement destroyed, Anton S. promised prize, and the route that could justify a harbor war. Matteo made the conspiracy's most contested asset worthless. Anton saw his future disappear. He reached for the console remote. Clara stepped off the hidden soul. The handheld receiver went dark. Anton realized the deception. He pressed the detonation command anyway. Nothing happened. Lucas' restraint shattered. He pulled the pistol into view and aimed at Clara. Sophia struck his wrist with the heavy DeLuca signet box. The shot went into the portico ceiling. Matteo drove Luca against a column. At the same instant, the two loyal guards hidden in Anton's sedan opened the gates from inside, allowing neutral council security onto the grounds. Anton fled toward the console room. Clara followed far enough to see him reach for a manual arming switch. She could not outrun him. Instead, she kicked the bucket Sophia had spilled earlier. Soapy water swept across the marble beneath Anton's slick leather soles. He fell hard, the remote sliding through the open doorway to Russo's guards. For the first time that night, Clara let someone else finish the fight. The residence was secured at 6:11. A neutral bomb crew from the Russo family cut power to the fallback room and removed the charge only after Clara explained why the shoe signal had never armed it. The staff emerged through the front doors one by one. Dominic arrived with Alina and a union representative, bringing Rafe Calder alive and willing to identify Anton as the man who had hired his crew. No single piece ended the struggle. The counterfeit shoe proved a DeLuca security mark had been reversed and weaponized. Mrs. Park's recording placed Anton's car at Clara's shop when the wooden last was stolen, and the transfer ink still trapped beneath his cuff matched the ink beside the forged signatures. Clara's phone recording established the North Dock reward Luca promised him. Rafe connected Anton to the men who used DeLuca colors during the attack. Together, the facts left Luca no loyal story to offer. He sat bound in the entrance hall, blood at one corner of his mouth, his expensive composure restored. "You cannot surrender a family root with one speech," he told Matteo. "Your captains will tear you apart. Then they can challenge me without hiding behind a woman's shop," Matteo said. The three Allied leaders entered only after the bomb crew declared the house safe. Matteo did not take the head of the council table. He stood beside Clara in the damaged entrance hall, where shattered plaster from the gunshots still covered the floor. Councilman Russo was a compact man in his 60s whose shoes Clara had repaired for years without knowing his rank. He recognized her at once. "You put new soles on my wife's walking boots," he said. "She wore down the outside edges," Clara replied automatically. "Her left ankle turns when she gets tired." Russo looked at Matteo. "She notices what powerful men miss." The council reviewed the evidence without spectacle. Anton demanded a lawyer and said nothing. Luca argued that Matteo's surrender of the route proved weakness. Russo answered that preventing a war was the obligation for which authority existed. The Belandi leader supported neutral control of the corridor for 1 year, after which the waterfront unions and legitimate shipping firms would determine access under a public lease. The illicit weapons compact died with Luca's claim. Matteo paid heavily. He lost nearly a third of the income his organization had drawn from the northern docks. 2 captains resigned before sunrise. A third demanded the right to challenge him at the next family assembly. Matteo accepted each consequence without taking back his word. Then he addressed the attack on Clara's block. DeLuca crews will stop collecting protection from every independent business between Atlantic Avenue and the old rail cut, he said. Existing debts are cancelled. Anyone who uses my crest to threaten those owners answers directly to the council. Clara studied him, not because of me, Matteo, met her gaze, because it was wrong before I met you. That answer mattered. At 6:50, police entered under an arrangement negotiated by the council's attorneys and the union representative. The explosives, kidnapping, arson attempt, and recorded coercion belonged in a court, not only a family judgment. Matteo surrendered Anton, Luca, Rafe, the devices, and the original recordings. Doing so exposed part of his own security structure to law enforcement and weakened him further. He chose it because otherwise, the shop attack would become another private injury, erased by private power. Clara gave her statement from a chair in the kitchen, While a paramedic dressed her forearm and the scrape along her side, Noah sat nearby in borrowed socks, eating toast with too much jam. When Matteo entered, the boy held out his unfinished boot.
"Can she still fix it?"
Noah asked him. Matteo crouched, not knelt in supplication, but lowered himself to the child's height. "No one can do it better." "No. Considered this. You broke her shop?" The kitchen went quiet. "Men used my name to break it," Matteo said. "I built a world where they believe that would protect them. So part of the blame is mine." Clara watched him accept a truth no counsel had forced from him. After the police took Luca away, dawn spread pale gold across the wet grounds. Matteo found Clara alone on the portico. His right shoe had begun to separate where her emergency stitching failed. He looked exhausted, still stern, still difficult to read except in the eyes. "You need a new heel," she said. "I know a cobbler. Her shop is closed, then I will wait until she chooses to reopen." He did not ask her to enter his house, accept his guards, forgive his family, or stay beside him. He simply stood with one ruined shoe and allowed her decision to exist beyond his reach. Clara touched the lapel of his work jacket. "I haven't decided what happens between us. I know, but you can drive me home." The tension left his jaw by the smallest degree that I can do. The damage to Bennett's shoe repair took 4 months to mend. Neighborhood carpenters rebuilt shelves, Mrs. Park organized meals, Mr. Alvarez repaired the cellar door, and Elena painted while Noah swept nails under strict supervision. Matteo did not arrive with an envelope. He sent a licensed contractor whose estimate Clara could accept or reject, then placed the family's legal restitution in escrow under court supervision. The money was tied to the documented destruction, not to Clara's affection or silence. She accepted only what rebuilt the shop and replaced customer property. The rest funded claims from other businesses that could prove coercive DeLuca collections. Ending protection payments did not transform the neighborhood overnight. 2 former collectors were arrested after shop owners reported them together. Matteo remained a mafia boss, not a suddenly innocent man. His world still carried shadows Clara would never romanticize. She established one boundary before their first dinner: no business discussed in her apartment, no armed guard inside her shop, and no threat made in her name. Matteo added a boundary of his own. If his presence created danger he could not contain, he would tell her the truth and leave when she asked. Their courtship grew in ordinary intervals. He brought shoes with honest damage, a split welt after a dock inspection, rain stains from a union meeting, a loose heel after standing too long at a court hearing. Clara suspected he could have sent an assistant. He always waited at the counter himself. He learned that she listened to old soul records while closing, that she hated roses because customers sent them instead of apologies, and that she drank coffee only after it had gone nearly cold. She learned that he read history at night, called his aunt every Sunday, and became quieter, not louder when angry. Attraction had begun in the wreckage. Trust developed through repetition, promises kept when no one applauded. Sophia visited twice during reconstruction. On the second visit, she brought Matteo's original wooden last, released by the court after evidence processing. Clara repaired the split heel and retired it to a glass cabinet with no label. She would never use it to make another secret shoe. Anton pleaded guilty and testified about Luca's financing. Luca went to trial where the recordings, physical evidence, and witnesses held. Both lost the silence on which their power depended. On the morning the shop reopened, Noah was the first customer. Clara finished his winter boots, even though spring had arrived. She had made them larger with removable insoles so they would fit when cold weather returned. He marched across the new floor, testing every step. "Nothing hidden?" he asked. "Only good cork and better stitching." The bell above the new door rang. Matteo entered alone in a midnight blue suit, his black shirt open at the collar, tattoos visible at his neck and hands. His expression remained controlled, but Clara recognized the question in his eyes. Every repaired shelf was full. The new workbench bore scars Clara had chosen not to sand away because her father's initials remained beneath them. On the wall hung the crowned shop sign, cleaned but not repainted. The neighborhood had restored her livelihood without erasing its history. Matteo placed the counterfeit Oxford on the counter. The police had returned it after the trial. Its reversed lion faced the wrong direction beneath the sole. "I thought you might want to destroy it," he said. Clara turned the shoe in her hands. Once it had been designed to convert her skill into murder and her refusal into blame. Now it was only leather, thread, and a mistake she could read. She carried it to the back room and cut it apart. She saved the calfskin for teaching apprentices how to recognize false welting. The transmitter went into a locked evidence drawer. The reversed crest she burned in a small metal tray until the thread curled into ash. When she returned, Matteo stood by the same doorway where he had knelt at midnight. This time he remained upright. "I have something to ask," he said. Clara leaned against the counter. "Ask, there is a family dinner at Sophia's tonight. No council, no guards at the table. She wants you there, and so do I. That sounds dangerously close to meeting the family it is. And if I say no, I bring my loose heel on Tuesday and ask again next month." Clara studied the man who had once believed protection meant deciding which risks others were permitted to take. He had surrendered territory rather than turn her life into leverage. He had accepted legal consequences, family dissent, and months of uncertainty without trying to purchase a quicker answer. She walked around the counter and took his hand. His fingers closed carefully around hers. "I'll come to dinner," she said, "but you helping me close first." Matteo removed his suit jacket and rolled his sleeves, revealing the fixed black and gray tattoos along both forearms. Clara handed him a broom. The coldest mafia boss in Brooklyn looked at it as if it were a weapon from a foreign country. "Start with the glass under the radiator," she said. "There is no glass under the radiator. Then you already learning." His eyes warmed, though his mouth did not break into the grin others feared or expected. He swept while Clara closed the register. Outside, evening gathered over a block, no longer paying for permission to exist. At the door, Matteo paused beside the repaired frame. "The night I knelt here, I asked whether I would live until morning. You were dramatic. I was dying. There's a difference. You taught me that too." Clara locked the shop and turned toward him. "You lived because you finally trusted someone you couldn't control. And you?" She looked back the light behind the clean window, at the workbench, the neighborhood reflections, and the place she had refused to surrender. Then she looked at the dangerous man who no longer mistook her freedom for a threat. "I stayed," she said, "because you learned not to try." They walked towards Sophia's dinner together, not ruler and subject, not rescuer and debt, but two adults carrying the cost of their choices into whatever came next.